There is a feeling that is very difficult to describe to someone who has never had it. It isn't sadness exactly. It is an emptiness in the way that word is usually used. It is something more precise, and in some ways more unsettling than either of those things. It is the feeling of standing inside your own life and not quite recognizing it as yours. Of moving through your day, in your home, with your people, inside your routines, and experiencing it with the faint, persistent awareness that you are watching it slightly more than you are living it. The version of you who woke up this morning and went through all the correct motions is real, yes. Functional, yes. Visible to everyone around you, yes. But there is another version, quieter, older, less easy to explain, that has been waiting somewhere behind all of it for longer than you can clearly remember. Psychology has terms for this: depersonalization, identity diffusion, existential estrangement. But sometimes it is simply what happens when you have spent years building a life that fits every requirement except the most important one. This is the psychology of feeling like a guest in your own life. It rarely starts as a crisis. That is the first thing to understand about this condition, and the reason it is so difficult to locate at its origin. There is no single moment that could be pointed to and named, no visible event that explains everything. The distance begins as an adaptation. You were young, and you were in an environment that required something specific from you. Maybe it required you to be easier, quieter, or more agreeable than you naturally felt. And you were intelligent enough to read the requirement accurately. So you adapted. Psychologists call this process self-concept suppression, the gradual, incremental compression of the parts of yourself that don't fit the required shape. In the short term, it works. The environment becomes more manageable. The friction decreases. But the self that was compressed does not disappear. It goes into a quieter register, still present, still watching, but no longer permitted full expression. Over time, you become so accustomed to the adapted version of yourself that it begins to feel like the original. And the gap between who you actually are and how you actually live stops registering as a gap. It registers as normal. There is a specific quality to the life built on suppression, and it is recognizable if you know what to look for. Externally, it often functions exceptionally well. The responsibilities are met. The relationships are maintained. From the outside, nothing appears missing. The architecture is sound. But from the inside, there is a particular texture to it. A texture of going through motions that are entirely correct, but feel strangely weightless. Psychologists describe this using a concept called experiential avoidance. The unconscious tendency to move through life performing the correct external responses while maintaining a slight interior distance from the actual experience of those responses. The dinner is eaten. The conversation is had. But you are watching yourself do these things from a few inches behind your own eyes. The clinical term is dissociation, but in its softer form, it is not dysfunction. It is protection. The performed life is not a dishonest life. It is simply a life where the honest version of you could not quite find the door. The longer this performance runs, the harder it becomes to locate the line between performance and person. There is a specific psychological mechanism that turns adaptation into architecture. It is the moment when the choices stop being choices. In the beginning, the adaptation is voluntary. There is an agent making decisions to present a certain version in a certain context. But choices, when repeated often enough and for long enough, stop registering as choices. They become reflexes. You stopped saying what you actually thought so long ago that the habit of translating your actual thought into an acceptable version became automatic. Psychologists call this automatic self-monitoring. You have spent so long moderating your responses before they become visible that you have lost confident access to the unmoderated version. You no longer know, with any certainty, what you would say if you stopped translating, what you would want if you stopped anticipating others. You are making the decisions, but the person who would have built this life from the inside out has not been consulted in a very long time. Here is the paradox that makes this condition almost invisible to the people who most need to see it. The person who feels like a guest in their own life is, almost always, extremely good at being in their life. They are reliable. They are competent. They are often the person other people come to for steadiness. They function. They often excel. There is no visible crisis or collapse. But this brings a very specific kind of loneliness. It is the loneliness of being surrounded by people who genuinely care about you and knowing, with quiet certainty, that what they care about is a version of you that you did not entirely choose. The care is real. The relationship is real. But the thing being cared for is real in the way a costume is real. You cannot easily explain this to the people who love you because it would require you to challenge the relationship they believe they have with you, so you remain in the guest position, present at your own table, familiar with your own rooms. There is no single passage out of this. It does not culminate in a technique or a prescribed sequence of steps that instantly produces the experience of being fully present. What it requires is something quieter. It is the gradual, uncomfortable, specifically effortful practice of reversing the direction of the adaptation, not dismantling the life that was built, but beginning, slowly and without theater, to consult the unperformed version before the automatic one speaks. Psychologists call this process identity reclamation, but it feels less like reclaiming and more like remembering. Slowly recovering access to a room that was locked a long time ago for protective reasons. That room is still there. There is a version of you that never agreed to become a guest, that knows the difference between the life built for it and the life it would have chosen. That version requires only that you stop treating it as a distraction. The life that fits you exists, not as an alternative, but as what your current life could become if the person who built it were finally allowed to actually live in it.